The house greeted him with deafening silence, even the old clock on the walls refused to keep time. Several months had passed since his mother's death, but Thomas still did not dare to sort through things. He feared this more than any nightmare. In the cupboards, boxes and chests, not only her life was hidden, but also the fragments of his own childhood. That evening, rain fell outside the window, heavy and merciless, as if the sky was trying to wash away all the dirt from the street. Thomas sat on the threshold for a long time before entering. Only when he felt the dampness seep through his shoes did he press the handle and enter the dim corridor. The walls looked at his acquaintances, but with strange eyes. Every scratch on the wallpaper, every faded photograph now seemed like a warning. In the kitchen, he lit a lamp. The light was dim, yellow, cutting out of the darkness only a piece of the table and a few old mugs. The rest of the house was drowned in darkness. Thomas opened the first box: yellowed postcards, children's drawings, old school timetables. His hand trembled as he pulled out the familiar things. Every little thing seemed to scream, "I'm still here." And suddenly his fingers stumbled upon something else. Underneath the stack of magazines lay a notebook in a dark brown leather cover. It looked too well kept, as if someone had hidden it and cared for it. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. It was his mother's diary. He sat down, put it on the table. For a moment he just stared at the cover, not daring to open it. Something stirred inside him, the fear that the words on these pages would change him forever. After all, his mother had always been an example of strength for him, a woman who had endured everything, lost her husband, raised him alone. How could you lose that image with one movement, just by opening the cover? But his hands had already made the choice for him. The first pages seemed safe, notes about work, small chores, memories of him as a little boy. Thomas even smiled heartily when he found the sketch near the date of his first day of school. But then the handwriting changed, the lines became crooked, trembling, as if she had written them at night, her pen clenched until it hurt. "That night I did something that saved us both, and killed someone else at the same time. I had no right to decide, but it was too late. Thomas never owed you the truth." His heart stopped at those words. He read them again, then a third time, hoping he was wrong. But the ink was clear, sharp, cruel. His mother had confessed to the crime. And the crime was directly related to him. Then the date. The year of his birth. A name he had never heard, Claire. I pushed her away. She fell. No one sees. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his ears ringing. Could his mother have killed someone? Was it a metaphor? But why was the handwriting so desperate? Outside the window, thunder ripped through the night. The impact nearly knocked the diary out of his hands. And at that moment, the door creaked. It cut through the silence, like someone's footsteps. "Thomas," a woman's voice said softly. He raised his head sharply. Jessie stood in the kitchen doorway, wet from the rain, her hair sticking to her cheeks, her eyes shining with anxiety. She looked at him, then at the diary. "Did you find something?" He opened his mouth, but the words stuck. In his hands was not just a book, but an abyss into which he had already fallen. And now he was dragging her with him. "This is not a diary," he finally said. "This is a confession." Jessie took a step forward. Your face became tense, and he felt that from now on they were looking together into the same abyss. And the rain outside the window was pouring even harder, as if the world was trying to wash away the truth he was just discovering. The kitchen was heavy with silence, and Thomas felt as if the walls were listening to their conversation. Jessie stood nearby, her shoulders still shaking from the rain, but her eyes no longer gleamed with fear, they were determined. She wiped the drops from her face with the palm of her hand and nodded at the diary. "Read aloud." He hesitated for a moment. Part of him wanted to hide those words forever, lock them in a chest with all the secrets that were better left dead. But another part was already burning, a fire of suspicion that could not be extinguished. And he opened the page. I saw her eyes. They begged me to stop. But I couldn't. If they had revealed everything then, they would have taken my son from me. I pushed Claire away, and she fell. It all happened so quickly. No one saw. Only me, and God. I pray every day that Thomas never finds out. Because how will he ever love me after this? Thomas felt the ground give way. Images flashed through his mind that he had never seen before: the dark hospital corridor, the female figure, the fall, the broken scream. These were not memories, they were something worse, an imagination fueled by the blood in his veins. She confessed to, his voice broke. It's murder, Jesse. Hush, she put her fingers on his arm, forcing him to calm down. Those are just her words. We don't know what really happened. Maybe she was exaggerating. Maybe it was an accident. Thomas looked at her. His eyes were burning. No. She knew what she was doing. Everything is clear here. She did it, to save me. Their eyes met, and Jesse saw what she had feared: not only anger but also despair was growing in his eyes. He flipped the pages. In the margins were dates, addresses, strange markings. Among them stood out the line, B13. Never come back. Next to it was a torn page, just a scrap of paper beginning with a name, CL. It's her, he whispered. Claire. The same woman. He held up the diary as if it were a weapon. Now I have to know. Who is she? Why did Mom kill her? Jesse took a step back, staring at him. His voice had changed, it had become sharp, as if he were speaking not only of the past but of his present self as well. Thomas, she said, I know you want to get to the truth. But remember, she's already dead. Is the truth worth risking ourselves now? He laughed bitterly. You don't understand. She lived for me, lied for me, and killed, for me too. And if I leave it here, if I just close my eyes, I will be an accomplice. The words echoed in his chest. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, and outside the window thundered again. In the silence, another sound slammed, the doorknob in the hallway. The door. Jesse looked around sharply. Did you close it? He froze. He was sure he was closing the door. Footsteps came through the darkness. Slow, heavy. Thomas felt the tension tighten in his chest. He put the diary on the table and picked up the kitchen knife that lay next to him. A shadow appeared in the hallway. A black silhouette, wet from the rain, with a hood hiding his face. The figure froze in the doorway, and a low voice burst into the room. The diary. Put it on the table and go away. Jesse grabbed Thomas's arm, but he didn't back down. He was already seething with so much fear and anger that taking a step back felt like betrayal. Who are you? He asked, clutching his knife. Did you know my mother? The silhouette took a step forward. I knew Claire. And if you want to live, forget her name. The words hit harder than any bullet. Claire was real. And the one standing before them also carried a piece of the truth. The lights of the lamp flickered as if the world itself could not bear this encounter. And Thomas knew, the past would not let him go. The shadow in the door stood still, but its presence moved the air as if an invisible pendulum had been set in motion in the room, and each of its shaky breaths measured the seconds until something irreparable happened, and Thomas, without lowering his knife, looked into the darkness of the hood, as if trying to see not the face, but the intention, because often it is the intention that cuts deeper than the blade. And when the stranger finally spoke, his voice did not thunder, but glided low and smooth, like water under ice. You have stood before something that has long been distorted and rests on other people's lies, and if you love your mother as I see in your hands, then either you will put this diary away where it will become paper again, or you will open it to the end and find out that there is not only her hand, but also someone else's blood, and then nothing in you will remain whole." And Jessie, who had still been squeezing Thomas's hand, suddenly let go and stood a step closer to the shadow, stopping the fear that was already asking for it, with a long and uncompromising intonation. "If you really knew Claire, then you came here not as a sail on a strange ship, but as a person from the shore who remembers the storm, and if you demand silence, then say at least one sentence without a code. Did she die then because of her, because of the woman who gave birth to this boy? Or are you using her name to exchange fear for power, because I will not allow someone who is afraid to show his face to become a judge between the dead and the living?" And the shadow slightly tilted his head, as if recognizing her right to sharpness, after which he pulled back his hood and showed a face that was not old, but tired, with a scar that went from temple to jaw, as if someone had once tried to erase him from history, but did not finish, and he, blinking slowly, spoke, without hesitation, but only laying out the card so that fell from the table. "My name is Orest. I was an orderly in the ward where your mother was placed after giving birth, and Claire was not just a random woman from the corridor, she was a nurse who collected papers that she was not supposed to see, because not only dates but also fates were mixed up there, and when she told your mother that she was going to the head of the department, the silence, paid for by other people's envelopes, began to creak so loudly that they had to muffle it with their hands, and I saw that movement, not like in a movie, but like in life, when every step consists of hesitation and despair, and yes, she fell, but when I caught her, she was still breathing, and I, a 17-year-old fool, believed that we would make it, but since then I have understood, not all falls are loud, some disappear in the documents, and when you ask if she died because of your mother, I will tell you the truth, which hurts both of us, because a choice that some will call motherhood, some a crime, and both names will be true. For the world rarely gives us words without poison at the edges." Thomas felt rage and dizzying hope mingling within him that at least something in this blackness would become clear, and without lowering the knife or covering himself with it like a shield, he uttered a long, confusing sentence, even to himself, in which all the pronouns went crazy. "If you saw and held her, if you remember her breathing and that last sound that became stranger than silence, then tell me who exactly my mother was saving when she pushed her away, and tell me, please, without evading, whether I was the currency for which her silence was paid and your scar, because I cannot stand another metaphor where my name is in brackets after the word mistake." And Orestes, touching his own cheek with his fingers, as if checking whether the scar was still alive, answered as if he were untying a knot that had become blue. "You have become what everyone who is born in rooms with incorrect signs, proof that the system works as agreed by those who will never show the checks, and if you need a name, you've already read it. The letter, KL, is not about the victim as such, but about the mother, without a last name, which was cut off from her like a branch, and yes, I know that now you will lean over the abyss and ask if she didn't carry you under her heart, and I will not give you a ready-made answer, I will give you a key, and it will not be a metaphor." He took out of his inner pocket a card with the erased embossing, B13, the same one that had flashed in the diary, and put it on the table, moving a step away from the knife blade, from Jessie's gaze, which assessed not the object, but the motive. "Building B, basement level, room 13, an archive cell where microfilms and copies of magazines were once kept, where no one could reach the internet and where the security guard writes crossword puzzles, because the cameras have been on preventive maintenance for 2 years, and if you want to know whose heart was under your name, you'll go there today, before the codes are changed, because they will be changed tomorrow, and then your story will become a legend for those who love another person to the point of self-destruction." Jessie, who had still kept her head level, as if she were balancing a glass of water on her crown with her own strength, took a step towards the table and picked up the card, examining it as if it were not plastic but an X-ray showing the fractures, and spoke evenly and insistently, like a lawyer who remembers both the question and the answer at the same time. "You say, today, you say, they'll change the code. You enter our house like a ghost from the old corridors, but ghosts don't have real keys and the smell of a wet jacket, so you're either saving us from a trap or getting us deeper into a trap, and if the former, why do you need to save anything at all? If the latter, why is your voice trembling where it's shameful to tremble? Because it's the trembling of people who are guilty not according to the law but before themselves, and I also want to know why you're saying that someone has already changed the script in our hands, And who is this someone whose shadow falls on your face when you say the word, tomorrow? And Orestes, as if accepting her right to put together puzzles where others break out in a scream, stepped back to the threshold so as not to seem threatening, but spoke as if each word cost him another centimeter of retreat. I am not a hero or an avenger. I am a person who has been carrying someone else's breath in his pocket for 20 years and does not know where to delicately put it so that it stops dreaming, and if I say, they will change tomorrow. I say this because today between 10 and 12 at night they are scheduled to shut down part of the system, and I know this not because I like spy games, but because I work for the contractor who maintains that old building, and if you do not leave now, your truth will once again turn into a story without sources, which people in the comments will call, The Legend of the Switched Children, and I will not stand another round of this hell, where the truth needs fresh blood, so that at least someone will believe it. Thomas felt the same wave that had washed away all the familiar signs in the house yesterday rushing from one shore to the other, and he carefully placed the knife on the table, because he realized that the blade was not solving anything now, but only making a caricature of the man out of him, and he said not certainty or surrender, but a confession that made it lighter and darker at the same time. If there, in B13, lies the answer, I will go, because I already live as if I have no right not to know, and if you lie, then this will be the last lie that my life can digest, but if you tell the truth, know this, I still don't know what to do with it, because the truth is not a bridge, it's a pair of scissors, and I'm afraid that they will cut me from the inside, but even more afraid that they will cut Jesse and me, because I just realized that any great truth comes with a bill, and in that bill there is always the clause, trust, and Jessie bowed her head as if taking an oath, and her voice became low and firm, like the timbre of a woman who knows she will endure what she was not supposed to see. We will not go blindly, we will go together, we will take copies of the pages, we will hide the diary where there are 1,000 locks, we will take a picture of this card and send it to 2 people we trust, we will not become pawns in someone else's game without a spare move, and if there is a trap, it will not close on our necks, but on their fingers that hold it, and if there is truth, we will take it, even if it bites, because I will not let you carry what eats you from the inside. Orestes nodded and, before leaving, looked up at the old clock that was silent on the wall and said a phrase that passed through both of them and stopped somewhere between their ribs. I know it looks like a trap, but I'll say this last thing, if Claire were just a victim, I wouldn't have come here. I came because she was a person who didn't let the system swallow another child as a nameless piece of statistics, and if you find what's there in B13, you'll understand that the words, your mother and your truth don't always stand on the same line, and that will be the hardest grammar of your life. After which he moved into the dark corridor and disappeared into the rain, leaving no drops or traces behind him, only the smell of cold air and the flickering of the lamp that was learning to shine again. They were left alone, and the silence between them was not empty, it resembled a loaded bridge that groans when something very heavy passes over it, and Thomas, pressing the diary to his chest, spoke without pathos, but without the right to be cowardly. Time seems to have gone by again, although the clock is silent, and we have only one loan on it, and I'm not sure I can repay the interest, but we'll take this debt anyway, because otherwise it will take us, and Jessie nodded, already turning off the light in the kitchen, already clutching the photographed card in her fingers, already hiding the diary in a sealed bag, and there was no fuss in her movements, there was the discipline of those who understand. Behind the door there is not waiting, but action, and when they went out into the rain that smelled of iron and leaves, and headed for the car, where the glass immediately became covered with drops, like the screen of an old film, Thomas looked back at the dark window of the house and thought something that hurt even without words. If down there, in room 13, I would meet not my mother, but the truth, which does not care about family names, would I have the courage to call her by her own name? And the answer did not come, but a silent agreement arose between them again. Their together was still stronger than any against, and let it become that lantern that is not afraid of fog. The climax came when the engine started, the headlights cut into the night and reflected the silhouettes that had fallen and disintegrated in the puddle, and the phone on the dashboard flashed with an unknown message without a sender, which contained only one sentence, long and cold, as if written by a hand that knows how to press on the right nerves. If you choose door B13, also choose what to close A12 on, because when one door opens, the other closes forever, and Jessie slowly raised her eyes to him, and he, without taking his eyes off the road, felt how the world had become a two-story knot, where any wrong move tightens the noose, and there was nowhere to escape, because no one returns to where the words have already been spoken, and the act was interrupted not with a bang or an explosion, but with the same disgustingly familiar feeling that their choice had just begun to make its choice about them. The night rain had not let up when they reached the abandoned building. The headlights of the car pulled out of the darkness the peeling facade, the windows covered with plywood, and the door with traces of old paint that had once been white and now looked like a bone that had lain long underground. The sign barely read, B, just one letter that carried more weight than all that concrete. Thomas turned off the engine and sat silently for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Jessie leaned forward, peering into the darkness, and whispered, "If this is a trap, we won't even have time to scream." He turned to her. There was no courage or bravery in his gaze, only the determination of a man with no other choice. "If we don't go in there now, we'll spend the rest of our lives asking each other, what if?" She sighed, then squeezed his hand as if she were signing off on this sentence. "Then let's go. Together." The inside smelled of mold, old paper, and metal that had rusted for decades. The flashlights from their phones cut through the darkness, illuminating hallways that looked like the entrails of a giant beast. The walls were stained, and the floor was littered with the remains of furniture. The license plates on the doors had long since rusted away, but each one still bore the faded numbers. The room marked 13 awaited them at the very end. The door was heavy, iron, with a mechanical lock. Thomas pulled out the card Orestes had given him and tried to insert it into the slot. Click. The lock gave way. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she answered honestly. "But we're going in anyway." They opened the door. Inside was nothing but rows of metal filing cabinets that looked like tombstones. The silence was even thicker than in the hallway. She wasn't expecting visitors. Flashlights scanned the shelves, stacks of files, old magazines, boxes of microfilm. "This is the vault," Jessie whispered. "It's everything they were afraid of." Thomas went to the first cabinet and began pulling out the files. Most of them were ordinary, medical records, protocols, reports. But then he came across a thin envelope with a red confidential stamp. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. The headline, "Fire at Hospital, 5 dead, including newborn baby." He read and felt his heart clench. The article had the mother's name. His mother's. But next to it was another, "Baby did not survive." "What is this?" he whispered. "It says I'm dead." Jessie moved closer, peering over his shoulder. "It's a fake, Thomas. It has to be." He trembled, clutching the sheet. "What if I'm not? What if I'm not who I thought I was? What if my mother really traded me?" He rummaged through the files, dropping them on the floor. His hands shook. And suddenly he found a file cabinet marked B13. There was an old recorder. Thomas turned it on. His mother's voice. "I'm sorry, my boy. I couldn't let you be taken. They said you had to give someone up to keep you. I agreed. I knew one day you'd find those words, and hate me." Thomas closed his eyes. Tears mixed with sweat. He stood as if he'd been nailed to the floor. "She sacrificed someone," he whispered. "To stay with me." Jessie hugged him from behind, but he didn't respond. His arms were dead, as if they were already holding someone else's burden. And then there was the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, confident. They weren't alone. The door to B13 began to close on its own, and through the crack that remained, they saw a figure in a dark cloak. A voice, familiar and cold, came from the darkness. "I warned you. The doors you open are closed forever by others." The door to B13 closed with a metallic crunch that sent shivers down your spine. Thomas and Jesse stood in the middle of the archive, surrounded by cabinets like tombs, listening to the footsteps approaching. The shadow in the cloak dissolved in the faint light of the flashlight, and only the voice echoed off the walls. You have opened what should have remained underground. And now you will have to pay. Thomas stepped forward, the recorder clutched in his hand. His heart was beating so hard it felt like it was about to break his ribs. You knew my mother, he said. You knew what she did. I knew, the shadow replied. And so did Claire. She died not only at her hand, but also by the choice we all made. Your mother was not alone. She only agreed to the deal. A child for a child. Silence for life. The words fell like stones. Thomas felt his feet go cold. So I live in someone else's place? That's right, the voice rang out, almost gentle. You only exist because someone else disappeared. Jesse squeezed his hand, trying to keep him afloat. It's not your fault, Thomas, she whispered. You didn't choose. But he couldn't hear her. One thing was pounding in his head, I am someone else's death. I am someone else's chance, stolen at the price of blood. He glanced at the recorder. The recording of his mother's voice still echoed in the air. I knew one day you would find those words, and hate me. You want me to hate her? He cried out. Or to hate myself? The shadow smiled, that was enough for Thomas to understand that there was no right answer here. You have a choice. Leave the recorder and I will make the truth disappear again. You will live on in your lies. But if you take it out of here, your life will be ruined. Everyone will know who you are. The silence hit harder than any threat. Jessie stepped between them. Her voice broke, but she said, he is not alone. And even if the truth breaks him, it will not break us again. Thomas looked at her. In her eyes he saw not fear, but determination. And he understood, his choice was not just his. It was both of them. He picked up the recorder. Let the truth come out, he said. Even if it kills me. The shadow froze. Then it retreated into the darkness. And only the words remained in the air. You will regret it. The door opened by itself, as if letting them go. Thomas and Jesse ran outside into the rain, holding the recorder, which now seemed heavier than any burden. They got into the car. They were silent for a long time. Finally Jesse said, so what now? Thomas looked at the dashboard, where raindrops were flashing. Now I have to decide who I want to be. The son of a mother who lied, or the man who will tell the truth. But can I be both at the same time? She didn't answer. Because she knew that question had no answer. They drove off the property, and the archives building was left behind, like a dark spot in the night rain. But Thomas felt that he hadn't stayed there. He had taken some of that darkness with him. And the last thing he heard that night was his mother's voice on the recorder. I did it to save you. I'm sorry if I ruined your life. The recorder clicked, and silence fell upon them. A silence that was heavier than any scream. And somewhere in that silence, a dilemma arose that would never let him go. Was his life worth the price they had paid for it?